No one said happy haircut or talked about my new fade, so it's a stick up. Nah, where are my manners? Hello, I'm Lee the Music Reviewer, and today we're going to be doing a short review of the new Basement album, Beside Myself. Basement, if you didn't know, British rock outfit, who I've held in quite high regard before due to their album Colour Me and Kindness, came out in 2012. A few great emo grunge cuts off that, songs like Hole, Spoiled, Breathe, just really hit me where it hurts, especially due to the emotive, impassioned lyrics and delivery, along with just some really sturdy, compelling and often abrasive performances. But after the release of that album, sadly the band went on a bit of a hiatus, came back in 2014 with a new EP, and then 2 years later in 2016 released the album Promise Everything, which is one of my earliest reviews. I wouldn't implore you to go watch that. About the album in general, I remember liking it, but I've not really came back to it since. I think it sort of didn't feel like the comeback people were expecting. That doesn't mean that it was necessarily a bad thing, but I think people were expecting a bit of an evolution in that sort of grittier grunge emo sound. I don't think they really got that, though they did get some good songs off that. The one that springs to mind for me is Brother's Keeper. So again, I wouldn't write it off completely, but I think I wouldn't be wrong by saying that some people were maybe a bit disappointed. Not a bad return, but the band have moved from Run for Cover Records over to Fueled by Ramen, which is a worrying sort of prospect, just because a lot of bands move to that label and just seem to just skydive in terms of quality. I don't know if it's something to do with the ethos over that label, or if it's to do just with the fact that it's an unlucky coincidence, but either way I was worried, though thankfully when it came to the first single of this, Disconnect, I was quite pleasantly surprised. While it might be a bit sort of straightforward in terms of its performance, I do think the aforementioned sort of impassioned lyrics and delivery can be found on here, especially with how the song seems to kind of focus on just a sort of like father figure, or some sort of elder really looking down on this person, really snidey, and you can kind of feel like that sort of like regret and just sort of snidiness is sort of like weigh on you a bit. It can maybe be a bit sort of unpalatable for some people, especially with sort of like the religious references and whatnot. So I thought it was a pretty good sort of like comeback single for them, though sadly I don't really think there's much on this record that gets me in the same sort of way, and this album does start off with Disconnect, so it pretty much means that the bar's set like adequately high enough for what you would want, but nothing really seems to reach that level. At some points I just feel like the delivery from Andrew Fisher just isn't up to scratch. There are some songs like Keepsake where I feel like he's got some of his best delivery like since 2012, though on that same mark I feel like there's a bridge at that point where his delivery just gets all droney, and I think he's trying to sound sinister in that, but it just comes off as like somebody's really bad King Cruel impression, and I just don't feel like it fits the song all that well. I feel like something with a bit sort of more sort of like vibrance to it, or just some sort of energy to it. You can sound sinister while not sounding sort of lethargic at the same time, so I feel that sometimes there's either some intentional sort of delivery choices that are a bit kind of off, and then I think sometimes it just doesn't sound like his voice is all that well mixed in with the rest of the performances. It sometimes feels like he's getting a little bit sort of like trimmed out, and not in an intentional way where that was sort of like the style choice. It just kind of feels like it could have used with a bit more polishing to really make those emotive moments that the songs are clearly implying that that's their whole sort of shtick, that's their whole point. But it never feels like they managed to reach that, and that's because I don't think the vocals really have as much of an oomph as they really should have. Like I say, it could come down to mixing, it could come down to just delivery choices and that, but I do feel like it kind of like works against it, kind of undercuts a lot of what could have been some good songs. Though there is a track like Sigmata, which I'm actually a fan of. I won't be the first person to mention how it sounds kind of Deftones like, especially down to those guitars, the way they're tuned, it's sort of shoegazy. It definitely feels like a throwback to their sort of sound. And I think Basement worked quite well with it. It definitely feels like sort of a progression of sorts from what they were doing before. Again, it might not be wholly original, but I don't think it's anything worth laughing at, and it definitely has like another highlight on this album for me. Slip Away comes close to hitting the same mark. It has a sort of Jimmy Eat World sort of vibe going with it, so I had the impression that there was going to be this really huge chorus or something like that, but the hook just doesn't live up to it. Not to say it's a terrible hook, but it just feels like it's a bit sort of an anticlimax. And again, I keep bringing up these comparisons to other bands, and I feel like it's still Basement sort of like struggling to find what they're doing in this like new era. I don't want them to go right back to Colour Me and Kindness and that, because I want this band to evolve and find their whole thing. And I think at some points in this record they definitely show that they're good at other sounds they haven't tried with before, but it does feel like they're still a bit sort of lost, and I really do hope that they find their way, because like I say, there are some good songs on here, but overall as an entire project I feel like there's just some fundamental flaws that really do undercut my enjoyment of it. But if you guys have listened to it, let me know what you think. I'll have links to stream and buy down in my description, along with some links to my social media profiles and all that jazz. Oh, and a score, forgot to give it a score. I'm probably feeling a decent to solid 5 on it. I feel like the 2 or 3 songs I would say I enjoy don't make it feel like an absolute waste of my time. But as always guys, thank you for watching, stay safe and stay hydrated.
For Nintendo GameCube. Today I was like, let's redecorate the house.
And I was like, maybe we should buy some furniture first.
Nice outfit. Where'd you get it? A garbage dump?
Yeah.